From Godfather 2 to Garfield 2. Let's talk us some cinema, because I gotta use this film degree somehow.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield, all those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. If he's led to a fight and a duel is due, then the red and the white and the blue will come through when Captain America throws his mighty shield.
With the dawn of Infinity War on the horizon and the very, very likely chance that Steve Rogers kicks the bucket, I want to explore the politics of the character. Like it or not, every single film since the original Iron Man has concerned itself with political military undertones, as subtext for America exploring their responsibility in being a global superpower. In the age of invisible wars and terrorism, superheroes are back to explore power relations. That's not something that Disney movies, Disney blockbusters have to do. So isn't it all the more interesting that films like Black Panther, Winter Soldier, Civil War explore this to such a weird and sometimes critical degree? I watched Civil War with my dad, who pointed out a very weird idea. The Superhuman Registration Act, the Sokovia Accords, are both ways for the government to regulate and therefore take away power from the Avengers, turning them into a public institution. My dad says, "Hey, is this film about gun control?" What? Oh. Holy shit, that's a hot take, Dad! And as someone who was completely Team Cap, devoted to liberty, freedom, and the foundational values of the past, this was a bit of a kick to the system. Team Cap? More like team, they're trying to take our guns away. Suddenly, it's looking pretty good over on Iron Man's side, which looks positively democratic by comparison. It got me thinking, if there's so many politics in this film, what does Captain America stand for? See, freedom is such a vague term. It's such a generic idea that anyone can twist it to validate and match their own worldview. But let's analyze the character, mostly sticking to the MCU, because otherwise, Steve Rogers is Perfect Boy. A kind, flawless, selfless leader who embodies everything positive with masculinity and is genuinely uncontroversial. Generally. His costume is a walking flag, unapologetically patriotic, indicative of America's roots. It's a very nationalistic design. His choice of weapon is a shield. Interesting. Congrats, you're an icon of pacifism, whilst you're a character and a nation that solves everything by violence. So there's already a contradiction. It's interesting how Steve Rogers is the ideal American, the perfect person. But this costume design, the mantle of Captain America at large, makes him a spokesperson for an entire nation. By doing anything with a character called Captain America, you are making a statement, consciously or not. The first Avenger actually makes light of the fact that he used to be a propaganda piece. But never forget, he is still just that. He has never been anything more than propaganda, even today, just operating in subtler ways. And what does Captain America, man frozen out of time, have to say about contemporary 2010s? Don't trust your government, mostly. Which is odd for a character called Captain America. But hey, that's the era we live in now, where mistrust and general cynicism is marketable. Now, neither the left or the right wing can claim distrusting your government, but if Tony Stark is a futurist icon of uncertain, unstable change, then Captain America is an icon of the past. Suddenly, the future being the enemy is a very modernist approach. Captain America is nothing but modernism incarnate. The 40s were the best generation, and the 50s instilled those good old-fashioned American values that are the ground of this fine nation. The traditional 50s were traditionally right-wing. They were a preservational era. It was the Red Scare. Captain America himself was a nationalistic icon, literally called the Commie Basher. So that was a phase. It can't be helped. Captain America is a nationalistic icon. The character always serves a purpose in Americana. But if Captain America's is so preservational, then why is he constantly rebelling? Oh, Steve Rogers will rebel against anything. Military orders, the government, his own team. Because he's a character that will stubbornly fight for what he believes is right, even though he is the outlier. Yeah, a man out of time. He makes people around him want to be better, like Sam, Natasha, and even Nick Fury. But if he is the odd one out, what is so wrong with modern day? Oh, wait, I know.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period. Trump, hail our people, hail victory!
Captain America punches Nazis is a statement that is for some reason controversial in 2018. Sometimes the Nazis are American government. Sometimes Captain America is the Nazi. Captain America vaguely does not like bullies. What does that mean, Disney? I mean, currently the world is trying to redefine the definition of fascism. Hey, the Nazis were actually socialist. Therefore, the left wing are the real Nazis, huh? But, that's a whole other thing. Captain America was the last character to get introduced into the MCU, implying that Shakespearean gods and radioactive rage monsters were harder to pitch to an audience than Little World Captain America. With a name as unsubtle as that, Marvel couldn't earn acceptance or worldwide box office by leaning into national identity. Instead, Disney Marvel do what they always do, and primarily lead with a character. And that's interesting, because he's a soldier. Individuality, not really an army thing. Focusing on the personality of Steve Rogers is something the comics staggeringly have never made much of a point doing. Instead, he defects from his role as a propaganda piece and immediately becomes an individual. A character with America in his name should never be marketable to overseas audiences. To gain the largest possible audience, Disney have purposely made Steve Rogers' motivations as ambiguous as possible, to the point of contradiction. He champions the American, yet fights fascism. He represents them as a walking flag, and yet constantly disobeys his government in every cinematic outing. This is because Steve Rogers does not actually embody the reality of American values. Disney have attempted to recreate the character as a neutral force. They did this by making him an agent of rebellion who stands up against moral objectivity. Okay, dope. Captain America is only interesting because it's been ripped from his original context. But even in his original context, in the confines of a period piece no less, Steve Rogers is a nostalgic pedestal. The complete embodiment of best generation into one character. He's a pacifist who doesn't discriminate between people of different nations. He'll fight the Krauts, but I don't want to kill anybody. Of course you don't, Steve Rogers, because you hate bullies. You don't care where they're from. America's sentiment is infectious, because how could I not root for that? It's a noble quote, and it speaks true of how America idealistically views its own motive as a country, but it isn't actually an outlook shared by the nation he represents. Even in the film, America is a nation populated by bullies who only see the physical. The one character who actually can see beyond the physical is a German hero. Peggy Carter is an English agent. Steve Rogers is a spokesperson for a country he has almost nothing in common with. Even in the best generation, he's too good for even them. So, make America great again. Was America ever great? Hey, don't look at me, it's just what Captain America said. Okay, here's something interesting in the first Avenger. Hydra are never really directly called Nazis. We know them as Germans, but the film calls them bullies, or agents, and in one instance calls them Krauts. Anything except actually having to refer to the issue by name. Some of the Red Skull's very first lines actually distance himself from the Nazi regime. You'll think this is about appearances? This entire scene exists to show that Hydra distances themselves from the Nazi party. Because history can be heated sometimes. But it's that non-specific nature that keeps the MCU Rogers tame. We know Hydra are Nazis through pop culture iconography from the last 7 decades. The striking iconography of the Nazi regime has been parroted throughout all pop culture. Disney don't have to, because audiences know fictional Nazis when they see them. These Nazis are actually so neutered that they're mostly played by American and English actors. Not one German man plays a Nazi in this film, and isn't that interesting? Tame and uncontroversial, but interesting. They are movie Nazis. And in this instance, fantasy Nazis. It's important to remember that the first Avenger isn't a straight period piece. It's also a fantasy film and a sci-fi universe. If you want an answer, we gotta talk about the Winter Soldier. Suddenly, Cap's outfit is a lot more muted. The lines are blurred. And the paranoia of McCarthyism is back, because now your friends are your enemies and your enemies are your friends. Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra is S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra is no longer a black and white evil threat, but now parts integral to American government. And this is where Steve Rogers truly becomes an individual. Alexander Pierce is such a good villain because he was born on American soil. He isn't a double agent. He certainly isn't German, and yet he completely embodies Hydra's beliefs, using American Lexis. But wait, how could a government official use Nazi vocabulary? How could the USA, protagonist of the world, resort to fascism? Well, da 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 da. Da, 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 da. The biggest mystery of this film is trying to work out its place in 2018. Captain America's modernist values will not help him against modern-day fascism. This is a film where Steve Rogers realizes he is not only a walking flag, but a walking contradiction. All this from a Disney film. And if it's in a Disney film, that means at some point this became marketable. At what point did skepticism become marketable? And see, Disney are actually very smart with what they've done here, because themes of governmental distrust, they're not left-wing or right-wing. They're just vague enough to remain impartial, but cynical enough to appeal to a modern age. All MCU films involve conspiring branches of governments. They're easily infiltrated, corrupt, or hatefully power-hungry. Winter Soldier and Civil War actively tells an audience the right for questioning their own institutions. And that's interesting, because let's zoom over to the comics. In the face of 9/11, yeah, we're going there, America faced huge social trauma. In the wake of such a catastrophe, a new era of terrorism began, and America fell back on old-fashioned 50s values. You can even see this in Marvel Comics. This image says 1,000 words. This one, ooh. The fire department and the police force are the real heroes. Trust your government. This is what I mean when I say Captain America is always a statement. He's always being used for a purpose. Just recently, Captain America was revealed to have been a Hydra spy the whole time. And, apart from being written by a complete hack fraud, and defacing the very origin of the character created by Jewish creators, punching Adolf Hitler on the very front cover, I don't think this story is the end of the world. Weirder things have happened. Yeah, it's a bullshit twist. Completely disregards everything about Steve Rogers. It's almost insulting. But then so is Wolf Cap. Steve Rogers was a wolf. A Captain America werewolf. My point is, because comics have been going on for so long, everything that can happen, every twist, every possible political outcome has to eventually happen. I will defend Nazi Cap for the exact same reason I would defend female Thor or Black Spider-Man. It's, variety, at the very least. But yeah, released at the dawn of Trump, this was a weird, sensitive time to make such a statement. Put into context, it seems like an ulterior motive. That's how you ended up with this. Congratulations, America, you played yourself. This is exactly what I mean. In the modern day world of Antifa and alt-right, radical America doesn't have a place for Steve Rogers. In a post-truth America, Captain America can be adopted as a fascist icon. That would be hilarious if it wasn't so depressing. Steve Rogers is a literal blonde-haired, blue-eyed Ubermensch. He's a German concept used against fascism by America. Congrats. the Nazis have Captain America. And although that statement doesn't physically mean anything, the implications of that are too depressing to think about. To sum up, there's a line in Civil War that reads,
Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right, even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
And whoop, there it is. That line is so purposely vague that anybody can feel empowered by that sentiment. A character that speaks for an entire nation, that battles Nazis, is apolitical. And Disney, in turn, they make political movies now, but they're still a neutral party. But see, that's important too, because even neutral media is by definition political. All film is political. Spider-Man is political. Batman vs Superman is political. Alien, Inception, Alvin and the Chipmunks 3, Chipwrecked are political. All films are made with a set of conventions. Hollywood conventions, marketing conventions, narrative conventions. And even the most harmless, unpolitical film you can think of still enforces a status quo. And that's what Disney does. That's all they do. Captain America is a dangerous IP, and for the moment, it's being kept tame. So the Infinity War, right?